Okay, I should be live. Sorry again for everybody having to stare at my face last week. I've done the same thing all year with the screen sharing. It's worked, so I'm really hoping this works, and it seems like it does. All right, sweet. So I started this with the same message last time. I'll reiterate. You're probably not going to be stealing on any of these two right now on the real stuff. I mean, Chris is taking 40, Pinnacle 30. 100 at Circa. On a painted number on any of these would not be a struggle to bet $1 million right now with like 3 texts to people. So that's like the level of how solid the market is. I still think one is decent right now. I'll explain why. And, obviously all the CLV and market maxis are going to think that's ridiculously arrogant to say. I'll talk about that in a bit. But it does kind of reiterate the point of, hey, these are NFL playoff games. Like, I think most people here should be able to pick off what they're looking to whet their appetite with a bet on a game by hunting for the best number and getting really good prices. And I know not everybody is set up to bet at like literally all of these at all times on all sports right now, but I did want to start. If you look at the description of this video, I've never done any deal like this. It's never felt like the right situation for me to do, but this book, relatively new, starting last year, called Bet 105, does offer supremely competitive pricing, as you can see right now. Just like an example on these football games this week, offering what I think, fair limits at how good these prices are. Obviously, it's not a charity. Like, if you need to go and bet all the garbage, like you want to bet stuff like this, they're not going to, give you $1 million on it. They're a sports book, obviously running a business, trying to make money. But they do have exceptionally competitive pricing, and anybody anywhere in the world can access this as long as you have somewhat of competency around withdrawal and deposit via crypto. So if you are interested in prices this good, I know not everybody's able to get like a Pinnacle quality price, depending on the country they're in and who they may or may not know. I think that's an option at worst, at least worth checking out for basically everybody watching this video. If it does interest you, I would appreciate if you did so with the link in the video description below. So I'll start with recapping the games last week. I'll start with college, just because it's most recent. Was basically painted 8. I kind of thought 9.5 was better. I thought 8 minus 110 was like between a 5 and 10 cent edge. I would, if anything, make that higher, honestly. I mean, it was 21-7 at halftime. Ohio State laying 7 in the second half and got bet and came out 10-0 out of the second half. It took kind of a miracle to even end up needing the last score to cover. My guess is the number I had was like probably just good, 9.5, but maybe 9.5 juice or 10 could make sense. If that game was played again next week, doesn't really matter because they're not playing next week. The NFL, Kansas City, I thought 500, anything in the 400s was cheap. I thought 500 was even a little cheap. Talking about the baseball pricing, I'll go over them in a bit. But that, 9 was probably good. It landed. Wouldn't really change either of those. I like under 41.5 even at some very scarcely available places. That one probably ran out good towards the under. Like, I wouldn't change the price a lot. I kind of thought I would book that to like 41 under 05, like DVIG. Like, I would book to 41 under minus 15, over minus 05 kind of. I'd probably do that again. I know I needed a safety to even come close at the end, but there was not at all perfect run out in the red zones, and obviously 2 missed kicks, one of them very makeable and a missed extra point. So wouldn't change much about that. That night was Detroit. I thought the number was a little high. I'm not going to like ask for credit or pat myself on the back, but with all the mouth breather parlays, that was the one I did not think made any sense to include. Obviously, much more intelligent, braver people than me actually bet Washington. Good for them. I don't know. We'll get to Washington too. I mean, that's just, I'm never going to be ideal at pricing these right now. like a team like this that, would have been probably a -4 in September and might be like a 2 or 3 right now. These are not my best teams, but I'll go over kind of what I think they are right now because honestly, there's not a lot of fluke to that. So some of that could have been Detroit, but like that game gets played again this week. Obviously, let's refactor all the same situation of even the rest and bye weeks. That game was what, like 9.5 and got bet down to like 8-ish off memory. 7.5, 8. That it didn't really look right. Who knows? Maybe it was right, but I kind of think 7's almost the most that could be right now. Maybe 6.5. Philly, I thought 6 reduced juice, like 6 -05 might have been like a 3-cent edge. It landed. Closed really good. I didn't bring this up last week because the net of it all was I ended up not really having an opinion on the game, but I actually think this Nakobe Dean thing might matter more than I was initially thinking. I totally understand that's typically a position that's way less premium, especially to like point spreads, like a linebacker like that. These, even in basketball, like those player types are usually the ones I care a lot about. I kind of feared that he was going to matter more than I thought. He's obviously very good. I didn't think the backup was terrible last week, but in rewatching some of that this week, I think there's a little bit of some susceptible places to attack them right now. We'll go over that game in a bit. I'd say the game closed perfect. And then Buffalo, Baltimore, I don't really think I even had an opinion. And it didn't look like I should have. I think I'd close the game the way that closed if it was played again this week. So yeah, I know I'm doing these public these last 2 or 3 weeks. I haven't really had anything that I've talked about in this way. So for everybody who's been on these all year with me, when I've had a game like this, they do move usually pretty quickly, and they've basically stayed there, if not moved more throughout the week. Obviously 1 or 2 here or there get shoved in my face. I would say this is a substantially likelier game that I'm about to talk about to get shoved in my face. First off, I would not expect potentially any move right away. I don't know. I haven't done a playoff game in one of these yet. I don't know what influence this will or won't have. But if it did somehow get some like crazy 10, 15, 20 cent blast right away, I would expect the other side to come back at some point. I'll talk about that in a bit. But just to be as fair as possible with everybody getting the price, I'll just cut to the chase. I think Kansas City -125 is a good bet. Of the same caliber of ROI as like something I would put out for baseball or bet myself for baseball, let's say in the range of like 4 to 8% ROI. I fully understand how wildly arrogant that's going to sound to people. This is me completely factoring in all of the respect and regression towards the market that I give. But even when I like get as humble as possible, I still have to make it higher. So it's all numbers. I talked last week about how I just find it really constructive to look at Kansas City money lines because I just think that's so much of how they coach and manage these games too. So this is what I mean. Sorry to interrupt myself, but see this move, this is kind of what I thought would happen. I personally think Buffalo like +17 will get bet at some point in the next 48 hours. So like if you miss that initial impulse at 125 or better, I think you'll be able to get that price or better at some point between now and kickoff. Could be wrong. Maybe it'll move more. I don't know. But I personally don't really see the point in laying 130 right now at all, especially because you can go lay 25 at half the world right now. But even because it's like a playoff game, like ideally you really should be able to find some way to devig these and get close to $1.20 crossing with a Buffalo friend or somebody who roots for the Bills. There's not going to be an absence of people who like Buffalo this week. Anyways, back to my numbers. So I just think there's a preponderance of evidence with Kansas City that they're the least you can price them as in really any football game is like an 800 team. I know that sounds like completely preposterous, but I don't know what more evidence we need. And beyond the evidence, like just using logic and axioms and what they're doing, it's just clear how good they are at winning from every level of where it might matter. And I just like wholeheartedly reject. I don't think this is like what's driving anything in the market, but I wholeheartedly reject like any media sentiment on this being some like scammy season from them with undeserved wins. I guess some of that could be unconventional, but I'll explain that in a bit. But that's kind of my number. And honestly, I really think, if anything, I'm rounding down 1 or 2 or 3% to call them that. What can I make Buffalo? I mean, empirically, they're what, 13 out of 17? That's a 764 team. To think that they're going to play 17 average games or like 500 teams throughout a season on all neutral fields, that the expectation would be that they win 14 games. I mean, you can look at what these preseason, regular season win totals are. Like, that's just would need to be such a good team with such little holes. We'll go over some of these injuries. I really think this wrap thing matters. I'll explain the math of that in a bit. I'm fully expecting Benford to play, by the way. So that's like, if anything, there's going to be an extra bump if I'm wrong about that. I think I'm being super respectful and super kind to call that a 775 team. And so if this is just like a normal, I round down on NFL home field and truly what I think this specific home field is, I think there's real advantages or a real case to be made that this home field might be more than 54%. And that might be conservative just because of how late Spagnuolo disguises everything, how hard it is to get into good stuff on every play when you're in that stadium. And specifically how much Buffalo relies on getting into good plays through verbal communication. Obviously, they ran extraordinarily good at home this year. If it's an 800 team versus 775 team with 54% home field, this game should be a $138 before you do anything with matchups or potentially the home field being more. It's not a stretch for, like, if you just say empirically, what has Kansas City been for more than 100 games now? Like, I'm not budging off the 800 number. So, like, if anything, you want to skew more towards empiricism, let's look at Buffalo, which literally was a 13-win team. That's more like a 765 team instead of 775. That make the game a $147. I don't think that's what this should be. Even if that's like through my like just isolated approach on how I would make this. Obviously, it's an NFL playoff game. Like, if I made this 147, I would know that I'm wrong. It's just about how wrong am I? Am I directionally correct enough to make a $125 cheap? And through a decade of doing this with massive, massive respect for what I must be missing to make this game this high, I still think 25 is too cheap. If this does come back like I would expect it to at some point in the next 48 hours, or if it doesn't, to be able to hunt out, like Sporttrade sells 27 right now. Somebody has 24. War has 24. Matchbook 24. Like, it's an NFL playoff game. Like, please try and hunt to get yourself a good price on these. There's a very good chance you'll be able to. So, yeah, like, I understand maybe why this came, just triangulating market ratings and stuff. I just don't even think it's arguable the Kansas City playing up in playoff games thing. And it's not like they're like jacking around, like wasting time during the regular season, but it's more like their numbers just get skewed because every single regular season game they play is basically the other team's Super Bowl every single week for like 4 years now. And it's just obvious to me, like not even arguable, that there's 4 real weeks a year that they care about. And this year they got to rest for one of them. I think part of the disagreement here and why this is even here, like last year, I thought there was a reasonable argument that Kansas City in the regular season, not scam, but like actually played down to like a power rating well below what they would have been. The last few weeks that they actually tried, like against Houston, at Pittsburgh, in that stretch where they play a bunch of games in a row, I think they were just starting to get cheap when they finally got Hollywood Brown back, who all the way back to July and August was supposed to be a really big part of this. I think there's some amount of like even the regular season version of the Chiefs at the end of the year beginning to get like a little underrated, especially when they figured out left tackle. So yeah, I think calling them something around a 6 or 6.5 is more than fair. And I don't really see a way to make Buffalo more than that with the personnel and the defensive backfield that's going to be there this week. I don't think Rapp is exceptional. He's definitely not. It's obvious he's not, but he's a solid NFL player. This guy Bishop against the Kansas City Speed and Andy Reid, Baltimore's really not well suited to exploit that. I'm tremendously worried about that if I was a Buffalo fan right now. I think there's going to be a lot more vertical passing than Kansas City has had in a while, especially the weather looks super calm. Matchups wise, I can't possibly see an argument of like why just the goodness of football and like the winningness quality of the teams would be way off the 800 versus 775. And so I'm just going to keep my number and say even regressing to the market, like 138, I think is the number I said. Let find structure constants 137. I think let's make it that. That's my number. And I know it's not going to close good. I don't know. I know there's people out there who think like if I have so much confidence and arrogance basically to believe that an NFL playoff game should be up this much, and I really had that skill that I would be a billionaire by now. I don't know. I'm in my 20s. I spend a lot of money. I don't know who all of you are to say what family emergencies I should or should not cover that take a hit to my bankroll. I'm not in a position where I think it's intelligent for me to go bong $1 million on a football game right now because I think it's a 10-cent edge. Maybe I'll continue succeeding as I have the last 10 years, and in 10 years I will, and I'll make sure this game closes 137. But I'm not there right now, and through all I've done with football, that's pretty decent conviction of what I think this game should be. So yeah, this isn't why I'm betting it, but just because this is essentially like a glorified talk radio show thing with YouTube. Like, I just really think we're at a point where a lot of the Kansas City winningness is being unappreciated and missed. And I'm a Chargers fan. Like, I should be rooting against them, but I'm just here to make money. And I don't think any of what they're doing matters. In terms of the regular season game, I'd almost completely ignore that. The guy who's come back who I think matters a lot is Omenihu for Kansas City. I think this Kansas City team is almost undeniably a better football team than the one that won the Super Bowl last year. I kind of am rating them as higher even than the team 2 years ago. 2019 would have been better, but I don't think this is like a down bad Chiefs team. Like, I really think this is a better team than the last 2 years. Everything, personnel, team quality, like everything. And so for me to like be convicted to call this game well priced would basically require me to say on a neutral field this would be even, and I just can't. Like, there's really not premium defensive players playing on Buffalo right now. This guy Rousseau is really, really good. Oliver, when he wants to be and shows up, is, and that could be an issue. Like, Caliendo does not look like an NFL player right now. I still think it makes sense to do what Kansas City is doing. If there was going to be a weak point, it would be that. I'm not expecting any like explosive, super useful run game, but the one thing I will say about Kareem Hunt, you can like call me out if I'm wrong about this. The guy avoids negative rushes better than any running back ever. Like, every single run is something between 1 and 4 yards. It's never going to be a good, explosive, helpful run, but he's just so good at the non-negative runs. And I think it's enough to control it somewhat that there's just real personnel issues in Buffalo's defensive backfield right now that haven't really been able to be exploited. This guy, Rasul Douglas, has like fallen off a cliff out of midseason. For everybody who is referring to Kansas City as like scamming all year, they played 8 playoff teams this year. If you take out the JV game against the Broncos, they went 7-1. The Bills played 5. They went 2-3. I'm not calling the Bills scams. I don't think they're scams at all. I think they're a very good team. I'm just saying with every team in NFL history, if you want to nitpick results and stuff, you can cherry pick any analysis to make any narrative supportive of whatever team you do or don't like. But, I just don't see any reason to get in front of this. I really think that in 20, 40 years, if I do have kids, they're going to be asking me how good Mahomes was. And I don't make bets or not make bets out of fear, but I'm not going to be the ones telling, little baby Johnny, like, yeah, like your dad or your grandpa was he bet on Brock Purdy in the Super Bowl against him because he thought, their coach was pretty sharp. Or, he bet against him in this playoffs because his left guard was not looking so great that year. He's better at winning than anybody I've seen, basically, maybe other than Brady. And I think these guys are hard to price. It does seem like the market's getting better at this. The market was a lot more against them last year. I just don't think it's quite where it needs to be yet if you can lay 125. So, yeah. That said, I made the total lower. I mean, at this point in the season, I have no interest at all in even considering betting that. It's more of a math thing around possessions. Like, both these teams seem very likely to reduce possessions. Yeah, I'm not getting in front of the two best point scoring facilitators in the sport in the world right now for the last game of the year. I mean, I've had a good year. I'd like to keep it that way. At 48.5, if you like under, I don't think you're an idiot. The math would probably support that barely, but it's nothing I would consider strong at all. But I think Kansas City, if you can lay 125 or better, is good. Philly, this one's a lot harder for me. So look, again, it's week 20 or 21 now of NFL. Like, we all know what they should be at. Philly is probably a 5.5. If you like them, they're +6. If you dislike them, they're +5. Washington's probably like a 1.5. If you like them, they're a 2. If you dislike them, they might be a 0.5. So if you stretch in the extremes that you're pro Philly and anti Washington, you might be at like 5.5 neutral, call it like 7 here. If you like Washington and dislike Philly, you might be at something like probably 3 on a neutral and like 4.5 juice here, something like that. I don't think you're an idiot if you price that game in either of those ranges. I just sort of think splitting the difference is pretty accurate right now. I talked about Dean earlier. I will say, like, if somebody had high conviction information that Hurts was going to play sort of as he's looked so far, I would lean Washington. I just think it's so, like, I would so confidently be expecting Philadelphia to dominate both trenches for 60 minutes, honestly. Like, if you just look at these rosters, like, the quality of football players basically everywhere other than quarterback are not that close to even. Honestly, if you flip quarterbacks, I mean, forget that. Say Washington had an average quarterback, like, I don't know who you think is average, Darnold, and let's just do that. Like, I really think this game would be like 8.5 or something, probably. But like, with the level this guy is playing quarterback at right now, even if Philadelphia dominates, like I think they will in the trenches, it's still such a probability that is more than a normal game that even like a 3-score game comes down to land 6 on concessions in the end with how high this guy's playing to right now. And it's not like there's no holes where Philadelphia can't be moved upon. I mean, the guy just did, I know part of that was Kenny Pickett playing for 50 minutes of the game, but they did just play in a war like a month ago. So, and these games closed implied a little lower than it would be here. So I think the Cosme thing is pretty big. Personnel wise, everyone preseason thought this offensive line would suck, and that really the only NFL, like meaningful NFL caliber player would be Cosme. As a unit, they ended up playing a lot better than I think anybody could have expected this year. But against these Philadelphia guys in the middle, it's more than just Carter. Like, this out of the blue, it started in the Week 18 game where they didn't really try. I thought Jordan Davis played his best NFL game that game, and it's been 2 pretty good ones since. I mean, not that he's playing like 40 snaps a game or anything, but like, he's been relatively useful, and I really think that seems exploitable. So yeah, if somebody had information, Philly's not a team where I get good stuff from. If somebody had information that Hurts is for sure like playing through really significant stuff, that could be worth a point and a half, and I wouldn't hate betting Washington. But I don't know that, and so I'd just be guessing. And as long as all I have is the public information, this looks kind of perfect sign in total. So not shocking this calls it any shorter. I'll look at the questions in a bit. I will say I'm not going to do a call for these because I'm not doing the time for this. I wouldn't ignore these two games. I have a former partner who, like way back in the good old days when you could bet heaps on basically anything, used to have these games as like really big bankroll builders. I really think if somebody watching this, if you're not already grinding these, and maybe things have changed, but like if you watch every practice, every coaching quote, learn everything there is about both these rosters, get in the DMs with all the media guys who are there at all the practices, it could play out to be a year where both teams just really are even, but almost always these games are going to just naturally be something between 0, like pick, and 2.5. Like it's hard for these games to close above 3. And it's super possible based on information you grind for that some of these games sometimes should be like, people think it's crazy, but like 6.5, 7, like you might be laying 110 on something that should be like 200 in one of these games. If you really grind it, build the right relationships and figure out strategies, who's playing, what quarterbacks are playing the fourth quarter, and how to price these all. Don't come asking me because I'm not even paying attention. I'm going to be focused on Pebble Beach next week. But if you love football and you're like building your bank, even if you're not building your bankroll, like if you have outs to get down on this, I wouldn't ignore these games as like unbettable junk games. There could be stuff there, but yeah, that's like fairly straightforward. As for money line or Super Bowl stuff for the Chiefs, I'm not even going through the math on what it would need to be. I mean, first off, there's, if anything, I mean, I don't bet this, but like, if anything, I do fractionally lean Washington, I guess, because of what I said on just like the range of probabilities of what Hurts' health could be seems more skewed towards him being a little healthier than it kind of looked like last week, but it's super, super guessing and speculative, and I don't bet on speculation. So, obviously, if you are trying to do the money line rollover, you'll look like an idiot if Washington wins. I mean, that game, Washington, Kansas City, would probably come like, I mean, I guess it would depend how the games looked. I think that game would come like Kansas City 4 juice or 4.5. If there were 3.5s, I think those would get laid, but maybe it could be like 3.5 minus 15 if Washington looked like really awesome. I don't think 3.5 flat would last for anything on that game. So you can convert what the money lines would be. Buffalo would probably be close to the same prices, and then either Kansas City or Buffalo versus Philly would probably be like kind of this price now, like AFC 1-1, 1.5-ish, like $1.25, $1.30 on the money line. AFC probably, if it was against Philly, again, could range a lot depending on the injuries and how crazy these games might look. So that gives you like an idea of what I think would be widely available. But part of what's missed when you do the rollover calculator on these futures is, you can hunt for the best price in the world at different places on each of these. So, like right now, War still thinks I'm a bumbling idiot with their 24 up there. You might be able to get a game like that in the Super Bowl, which would change the math for that. But me personally, not financial advice, I'd just rather be in Bitcoin for 2 weeks than figure out like my ROI, if I'm even right, might be like 5% on this Super Bowl bet, and it might be 5.5% if I roll over the money lines, or the other way around. I mean, just hold Bitcoin for 2 weeks, in my opinion. Unless you can bet that Bitcoin notional, the future. So yeah, unsurprising, there's 2 football games. I mean, look, for me, it just comes down to like, I'm used to a full week of football. I got 60 college football games and 15 NFL ones to look at in price. The Philadelphia one, for sure, I walked through the math. Like, if you're crazy extreme on the game, you can make it 4.5-ish. If you're crazy extreme the other direction, you can make it 7. It's split in the middle. That's kind of what I think it should be. That would be my work on the game. I'd move on and look at the other 75 right away. Like, there's just not a lot of interesting things there. Because there's 2 football games, I'll talk about it, but nothing there. Kansas City, I would bet this game if this was hidden in a stack of 75 games. It's just, I would pretty with conviction think that, like I said, even respecting the market and everything, I'd probably think 137 is right, fully knowing it won't close there. And like, even, $1.25, I would be shocked if that got DVIG positive CLV. Like, I could see it closing here, like where it is right now, like 30 take back 110. So whatever, like 20 or 21 devig. So like a -4 or 5 cent edge is probably what the market's going to tell me I have here. But I'm not here to have the market tell me whether I'm good or not. I'm here to just make money, and a decade of that seems to be supporting me. So yeah, let's look at the questions. How do I? Oh wow, a lot of questions. Oh yeah, Notre Dame under 17. Yeah, I liked off-market numbers on Notre Dame team total. What would I think of that total again? I don't know. I mean, things ran perfect on that first drive. And then they had 2 other drives in the first half and couldn't sniff a first down. And the other 2 touchdown drives required, perfect 2-point conversions and I think at least 1 or 2 fourth downs. I don't know. This guy Ryan Day is really bad with the second halves and managing these. I probably. I don't know. I'd probably leave it alone. Jackson Koiven nature. I mean, this guy's pissing me off. I don't know how I made the cut. All right. Hodges birdied. He's 200 through 6. Yeah, I don't know if you swept that cut line yesterday. I mean, the kid, he was like 23% to make the cut. He had 6, 8, or 6, 7, 8, 9 on the front. Well, his back on North yesterday. 7's easy, but those other 3 were like kind of monsters yesterday. Played him 2 under. Hodges eagled 6. That's cool. Koiven missed the green on 14. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I thought that was cheap, but we'll see. Good for him this week, though. Yeah, obviously, I'm going to be extremely two-way on Buffalo, Kansas City. When we're talking about shitcoins, I mean, ideally never. So they exist. I don't think what little old Barry Horse on the internet says about shitcoins is going to end their existence on the planet. If they do, like my whole stance is trading them is kind of amoral. I don't really think it's immoral. It certainly isn't moral, like actively. But the markets exist, and if I see edges in the same way, like I think $1.25 on Kansas City is cheap, then I'll exploit them. They obviously, I think, make the world a substantially worse place. All of them, that includes Ethereum, Ripple, Solana, whatever other bullshit you've been convinced might have some sort of technical legitimacy, is not. If you don't understand this yet, like the most dumbed down way possible, a blockchain is just a chain of blocks. It's really nothing interesting. The underlying data structure called a Merkle tree has existed since the 1970s. You can look up this guy named Ralph Merkle. Bitcoin is not what taught the world about blockchains or blockchain tech. If anybody ever starts a sentence or says anything along the lines of, I don't know so much about Bitcoin, but I think this blockchain tech is here to stay. I'm really interested in blockchain tech. I'm a blockchain entrepreneur. I'm a blockchain investor. Block that person and never do business with them ever. They're either complete bumbling idiots who have, basically presented themselves as being more intelligent than they are to sound cool, or disgusting, evil charlatans who are affinity scamming on Bitcoin. I really believe shitcoins have sent back global Bitcoin adoption, probably something on the order of a decade. I still think the majority of the world thinks that, Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency and there's others, instead of, all this shitcoin cryptocurrency mania is just recreated digital fiat nothingness and going to zero, and don't understand why Bitcoin's special. And I think the world would be a significantly better place the sooner people learned the second point. But they exist, and if there's edges, I would like more Bitcoin for myself and my family, so I trade them. But I'm not going to talk about or endorse them as anything other than, basically digital fiat Ponzi's that are going to zero. Bill's front four is by far best part and most legit part of their defense against Connor Frazier. I agree. I agree. I mean, that's why, look, if everything was obviously in Kansas City's favor, we wouldn't get to late 25. I mean, there's advantages in both parts. Buffalo's a very good team. I prefer much rather the games. I'm not betting, 1/5 as much on this as I would on something like, Tulane -15 against UAB when we know Zeno's out and it's going to close 19.5 and they win by 50. It's not that where you get to bet against like a high school kid. That's not what the Bills are. This is a very good football team. But I still think it's cheap. Do we all agree MSTR is a better hold than a Bitcoin ETF if you have funds locked up? Yes, I do. Obviously, do your own research. Everybody, if they're interested in MicroStrategy, should watch, I believe it's the Q3 earnings call from last year that I think came in the very last, like Halloween, or maybe the first week of November last year, to sort of understand this better. I do think there is a little bit of like self-rebalancing limits around what the premium could really sustain at, like if you want to call it MNAV premium. I think it's hard to have any prolonged period where it hovers much above 3, because anytime it would, Saylor would just be jamming the ATM so much to get more Bitcoin and it would refix itself. But I do think it works out to be, risk adjusted, a plus EV thing to hold. Well, risk adjusted is the wrong word. Maybe not. Yeah, I would say risk adjusted. It's hard for me to weigh the like sovereignty and like actual. I don't even think it's a belief. I think it's just the epistemology of Bitcoin is just like it's redefining what the word property means to our species or asset means to our species. And I don't really like giving up that part of it. But yeah, if I had locked funds, I would definitely prefer MSTR to ETFs. What did college football season end up at? These were like the Friday call games against painted numbers. On the halftimes, we're up. One moment. The college football halftimes are up 5.5 units after a loser on Monday, and the team totals are down 2.8 units, so 2.7 or 2.65 units on the college football season from those. And then these, I'm happy. That's basically both meeting I obviously don't expect to lose on the team totals, but was kind of like I've walked through this before, but the hard to like release a team total. The market's just already starting out as a 30-cent line. And when you're like me tracking against, like this Kansas City game, I just said like would have been pretty trivial for a lot of people to lay $1.20 instead of 25. If I'm doing that on team totals, then it's like, if it's $1.15 either way, it takes it from, which is already not awesome, from it's not just like a 5-cent penalty. It's like, then I'm kind of laying 125 if I'm tracking it's like the worst number in the world. Not at all impossible to overcome, but it's not something I'd be focused on doing anything other than just like betting myself at good prices, which like the sharing bets with people is like helpful when it's, in my opinion, an actual winnable number against like a painted thing most people can actually follow. If it's like half the world can bet under 17.5 -15 and everybody else has -130, I'm not really breaking any secrets or helping anybody there. Do we like AFC $1.30 win the Super Bowl? And I don't like posting up to bet that. I mean, I think that's kind of what it would close against Philly. And so, yeah, you'd have whatever, DVIG Washington right now. I'll just take Chris. Chris is 289. Take back 236. So DVIG'd like 72%, 72.3% for Philly right now. So you'd have like a 28% chance of closing higher than 130 and be frugal on 130. So yeah, I guess, yeah, that's probably plus EV. Is it plus EV to post up to bet something that has a 72% chance of not being an edge, not being a negative edge, but just probably not being an edge? No, not in my opinion. What do I think about the executive order? Yeah, so I mean, if I'm going to talk about any of these topics, the first thing that is really important to emphasize is like they governments, states, politicians, all these people need Bitcoin far more than Bitcoin needs them. It's going to aggravate me if, as the most obvious game theoretic outcome of all of this was always the case for the last decade, and as this plays out over the next decade with nation state stacking, that people are going to say, oh, it only worked because you got lucky because the government started buying. This was always going to happen. This was all programmed. This isn't like an optional adoption pattern. And so I don't love how like cucked a lot of the Bitcoin community seems to have been from Trump, and like how people are just bowing down and like not disavowing all the shitcoinery, or thinking that like Bitcoin's future relies on these executive orders or anything. Like they're going to happen, obviously, but like they were always going to happen, and whether they did or didn't doesn't stunt anything about what Bitcoin is. So it would be arguably illegal if I did know anything about this to be sharing it on a public YouTube broadcast. I don't think it's like a super useful question to like anticipate the speculation of 2025 executive orders that may or may not happen. I just like, what's the point? Like, you want to short Bitcoin if this doesn't happen? Like, the optimal risk-free strategy for money for everybody in the world, unless you're a parasitic leech, is all in spot Bitcoin. And I would have plans in place for if edges present themselves, what I would do. And so I'm planning for what would happen with the most bullish imaginable executive order, and would react accordingly with what I would think would be an exceptional trade for multiple months this year. If like the aggressive Loomis bill went through of like stacking 200,000 Bitcoin per year and announcing it to the world over the next 5 years, obviously the domino effect of that would be crazy. I wouldn't even put a ceiling on, I mean, I think gold parity would happen relatively quickly. So like 500 to 750,000 per Bitcoin. Obviously I would be more aggressively positioned for that trade than just all in spot Bitcoin, and would live with the consequences. I obviously wouldn't like risk everything. But yeah, like I just have those plans in place, and I'll react once we know what's happening, but I don't think it's usually helpful to guess. What did 2024 MLB season end up? Oh yeah, I guess I'm not screen sharing. Let me make sure I'm not doxing anything with people's names. So, I mean, I have the dollar amount of what my bets won. Like around 18 units at 4.5% ROI, but like these numbers all are meaningless. Like if I were betting overnight baseball totals, I'd be highly disappointed, and was looking at anybody else, I'd be highly disappointed if you weren't like 5 to 10% ROI with a lot of volume, potentially winning like 50 units a year if you're betting overnight everything. So like that's against a painted market number on real stuff, taking big bets, and nothing close to the best number on the screen, and betting 0 injuries team. I'm not saying that to gas myself up. It's just like when people hear like I won 10 units in football, I mean, are you jamming like Sunday openers on like Sunbelt totals at Circa? Or are you betting on game day? And like, I genuinely believe 10 units on game day is a more impressive number than winning 50 units betting bullshit. So yeah, I'm happy with the baseball season. For the people I worked with last year, that proved like fractionally more challenging than I thought to send without messing up too much, sending out games the sort of way I had planned for this year. So I think the average person following there was up like 12 units. Pretty similar ROI. It's more just a couple of the games moved more than I thought, that started to trickle out to the screen more than I thought would happen. And so the volume was a little lower, but ROI was basically the same. All right. Getting some nice comments here from Mr. Fade, so I'll wrap it up. Thank you to everybody else for listening this far. I'll obviously do one more of these for the Super Bowl, and have some Bitcoin stuff I'll start posting next week too. Take care and have a good weekend, everybody.